All right, and welcome back to another episode of the Dr. Greg Show. In today's episode, we're continuing in that hormone conversation. And by the way, like we've talked about, it's a lot more than just your sex hormones. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the thyroid and the intricacy of an optimized thyroid, which is very different, ladies, than a normal thyroid. You see, we have to understand that many women right now are walking around with a suboptimally functioning thyroid. You have fatigue, dry hair, dry skin, you have sluggish bowels, you're not sleeping well, and yet when you go to your doctor, your labs are normal and you feel anything like normal. You are cold all the time. You can't temperature regulate. There's just so many aspects of this. And instead of trying to chase numbers like a normal TSH, for example, we really need to zoom out. We need to have an opportunity to look at the whole body and what's going on with that. So there's a whole litany of symptoms that can be associated with a subfunctioning thyroid. And again, I just rattled off a few of them: brain fog, cold skin, bloating, fatigue, brittle hair, hair falling out. Advanced forms will have like the lateral third of the eyebrow thinning. Think of everything slowing down in your body, slowed metabolism. I'm gaining weight, slowed digestion. I have issues with IBS or bloating or constipation. Those are all of the conversations. And what I know is you know what's going on. And what I also know is many of you have sought out answers, information, and you're being dismissed, right? You know that you don't feel like yourself. And that's one of the most common things that my patients say to me is, Dr. Greg, I just don't feel like myself. Something's going on. I've looked for help. I've sought answers, and I'm told everything's normal. And what I want to tell you is that you're not alone. I had a patient named Penny come to the practice several years ago. 8 years, she was treated for hypothyroidism, but she was still exhausted, even though her labs were normal. And we had to take a fresh look at her labs. So as a functional medicine doctor, I look at labs very differently. I don't just look at like, what is your thyroid doing? What are your sex hormones doing? We have to zoom out and look at what everything is doing. So globally, your thyroid, it's an amazing little tool, and it's active in so many areas of your body. One of the main areas is your body's thermostat, and it's a profoundly powerful part of your metabolic system. So, and all of the hormones play into it. So let's just talk about this. So you've heard me say on videos in the past that all of your sex hormones, pregnenolone, progesterone, DHEA, testosterone, estrogen, they all come from cholesterol. But what a lot of people forget, so think of it like a waterfall, right? So cholesterol's at the top, and then it has to go through the thyroid. So the thyroid is what we call a rate limiting step. And actually, the component of the cell that does this is something called the mitochondria. And the mitochondria has been getting a lot of buzz lately about what it is or how it works inside of the system. And so if the thyroid is not optimized, then it's actually not possible for cholesterol to get down into the rest of your hormones appropriately from that standpoint. And then there's even aspects of how things like estrogen and progesterone can make components of that. Now, the other part of it is, let's just talk biochemistry a little bit. So there's a hormone that most of you have been tested for. It's called TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. And by the way, it's actually produced by something called your pituitary gland, of which we call the master gland. So if the body needs more thyroid hormone, the pituitary gland says, hey, thyroid stimulate more hormones. So then your thyroid makes something called T4. Now think of T4 as like crude oil. Think of like gasoline refinement. Crude oil, if you went and put crude oil in your car, it does nothing. Like it would actually ruin your engine. Crude oil has to be refined. So T4 has to be converted into T3. And by the way, 60% of that conversion, ladies, happens in your liver. 20% of that conversion actually happens in your gut. So when we take a proper view of the thyroid and how it's working and the conversion between TSH and T4 and T3, and even looking at things like reverse T3 or anti-thyroid antibodies, we have to understand who are all the players inside of that. So here's a 2011 study. The Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism found that even subclinical hypothyroidism, and that's defined where TSH is slightly high, but still in range, was associated with higher body weight, fatigue, and depressive symptoms in midlife women, symptoms that often improve with thyroid optimization. Like, look at this. Like, who's going to sign up for this? Higher body weight, fatigue, depressive symptoms. And you're like, oh my gosh, you just said me, Dr. Greg. Another piece of research. This is the Lancet Diabetes and Endocrinology 2017. Estrogen decline in perimenopause disrupts something called deiodinase activity. This is the part of that enzyme in the liver and the gut that converts T4 into T3. Explaining why, because many times in perimenopause, estrogen can be normal-ish, it can be high, it can be low, but what it does is it disrupts that conversion of T4 into gasoline, which is T3. So what I want to have you understand is normal isn't optimal. And that's very important to understand. So the idea is that we have to look at symptoms and the data of the labs. When I did my postdoctorate work through WorldLink Medical, the Dr. Rosier, our lead MD, was like, yes, labs are important to a certain extent, but you must start talking to your patients, right? We know what the thyroid is designed to do. We know what roles it's supposed to play. So if you're not experiencing those in your life, then respectfully, like, kind of who cares what the labs tell us? Oh, you're normal, but you still have fatigue and depression and you're gaining weight and you're constipated. Like, oh, I'm sorry, your lab's normal. You're like, but I'm not. So normal isn't optimal. So if we think about this conversation, so T3, like think of like a campfire, right? T3 is the spark, but it's the liver that actually stacks the wood to give it something to do along the way. Drainage. If you've listened to me for any amount of time, you've heard me talk ad nauseum about drainage. And drainage is simply how God designed things to get out of the body. So think of it like a funnel. At the bottom, we have the gut, then the liver, kidneys, lymphatic system, like your oil filter. Your brain has its own lymphatic system called a glymphatic system. Ladies, I actually believe that your menstrual cycle is part of your drainage pathway, your sweat glands, and then your respiratory system. So if our drainage pathways are burdened or stressed, then they lose the efficiency of the ability to do this intricate hormone conversion, right? Even like sluggish bowels, like constipation, that can slow down bile flow. Your liver makes bile and it squirts it out into your small intestine, and then it's supposed to carry a lot of these toxins out of your gut. So if everything's slowing down, then there's an interesting lab that I run, and not many doctors run this. It's called reverse T3. So reverse T3, just so you know, my sweet spot for reverse T3 typically in labs is between 10 and 20. If I see reverse T3 above 20, even if your free T3 is well above 3 and sometimes much above that, reverse T3 can actually rob or take that T3 and deem it unusable. Typically, if I see reverse T3 less than 10, then I'm looking at chronic infection, chronic stealth infections like Lyme, parasites, virus, bacteria, fungus, mold, heavy metals, those kinds of things. But reverse T3, if it's high, it's like, I don't care how much gasoline you have, the fuel line to the engine is not going to do what it's supposed to do. We've had just so many people that, and it's not just you need a bunch of thyroid hormone. I want to make that really clear here. Yes, there's a time and place for naturally desiccated thyroid hormone. And for some women, it's an amazing tool. Actually, I had a patient yesterday. She was a young woman in her 20s, and she absolutely had like sex hormone issues. She would have bad periods, PMS, hormonal acne. And when we actually treated her and we brought her through like drainage and nervous system work, it was actually the optimization of her thyroid, because we didn't give her any sex hormones. We optimized her thyroid, and within about 3 months, all of her thyroid numbers were optimized. And more importantly, she's like, I have never felt more balanced hormonally ever in my life. So the question I think that has to be asked is, your thyroid's probably not broken. It might be blocked, right? Most women don't have a production problem, right? Like when I run a lab, I look at T4. It's rare to see low T4 because TSH tells the thyroid to produce T4. What we have is a conversion problem. We have this inability to turn crude oil into gasoline. Now, the thing that I want to say to you is it's very treatable. And when you can zoom out and understand why the body is potentially responding appropriately, that it's doing, it makes sense that we're like, oh my gosh, no wonder why the liver is burdened with lots of other things going on. No wonder why it's not prioritizing that particular function. If you're the person that is freezing when everyone's fine, it's not in your head, it's actually in your cells. Your body isn't broken, it's talking to you. So listen early and act before that T3 drops and plummets to really low. So when we talk about thyroid optimization, it is all of the symptoms of hypothyroidism are easily the top symptoms that I see clinically. The number one symptom that women talk about in my practice is fatigue. And the lion's share of them have been to their primary care doctor, and nothing against your primary care doctor. They are trained to use the range. And if you're above or below the range, they're trained to give you a medication. And if you're in the range, and by the way, that range can be huge, you're normal. And there's nothing they can do about it. I also think it's important to be measuring anti-thyroid antibodies. So the two favorite anti-thyroid antibodies that I measure are anti-thyroid peroxidase, anti-TPO, and then anti-thyroglobulin, anti-TG. Well, what does this tell us? And a lot of doctors don't measure those because they're like, it doesn't change what we do. It kind of doesn't matter. It matters. It matters profoundly. You would be surprised, well, maybe not if you're listening to this podcast, you'd be surprised how many women that I run a full thyroid panel on. And by the way, I run a full thyroid panel on all of my patients. How many women have a quote unquote normal TSH, but they have elevated anti-thyroid antibodies? So that is something called autoimmune thyroiditis. Now, Hashimoto's and Graves'. So Hashimoto's is by definition high TSH and positive antibodies, and then Graves' disease by definition is a very low TSH and making anti-thyroid antibodies. In my opinion, and I'm almost 25 years into this, that is not a thyroid condition. It's actually an immune system condition. So if you are making antibodies, whether it's anti-thyroid globulin, anti-TPO, ANA, rheumatoid, any other of the antibody markers, it's important for us to know what's going on with the nervous system. Why is your body making antibodies? You see, antibodies tell us that your body is in high alert and it's finding you as foreign and it's attacking tissue. And if you stay in autoimmune thyroiditis long enough, your body will essentially attack the thyroid. And then over time, then you'll become hypothyroid. So if we can catch it early, and by the way, like I said, I run this on all of my patients, it's very important for us to understand what's going on inside of that. Again, this is part of a symphony, right? When we talk about hormones, we must zoom out instead of trying to zoom in on things. My beef with specialists is they know too much about not enough. So when we talk about hormones, remember we're talking vitamin D, we're talking insulin, we're talking the thyroid hormone, melatonin, and then all of our sex hormones, right? Pregnenolone, progesterone, DHEA, testosterone, and your estrogens as well. It's a symphony. There must be adequate amounts of woodwinds, brass, and percussion for this symphony to sound appropriate. So hopefully this sparks some interest. Maybe some of you are going and looking at your labs as well. And by the way, Western medicine associates only one type of hypothyroidism. It's called primary hypothyroidism. In functional medicine, we actually acknowledge that there are 4 types of hypothyroidism. And a lot of them have to do with the conversions, your ability to convert T4 into T3, your ability to not have too much reverse T3, your ability to go from TSH into T4. All of those are things that are possibilities. So hopefully this gives you a brief understanding of what's involved with the thyroid. As always, we have some upcoming question and answer podcasts. So if you have a question that you would love for me to address on an upcoming podcast, just in the show notes, there's ways to reach out to us. Just jump in there, and I would love to take your question on the air and answer that. Also, if you're interested with working with us or learning more about who we are and what we do, there's also lots of information for that inside of the show notes as well. So at the end of the day, here's what I want to leave you with. Normal isn't optimal, right? Perimenopause with hormone shifts and stress and nutrient depletion can really put tax and a strain on the thyroid and what it's supposed to do. Healing starts in the liver and the gut and stress pathways, not by just giving you a bunch of thyroid hormone. And then little things like daily habits, hydration, protein, movement, certain nutrients like selenium and iodine, for example, are really important to support that metabolic pathway. So there you have it. There is another episode of the Dr. Greg Show. What an honor to bring you real world information. And again, to circle back, why is there a middle-aged guy here talking to women about hormones? And the reason is this middle-aged guy is married to a woman that is a middle-aged woman that has 5 kids, that has a pretty stressful world, and she manages lots of things. And I have had the opportunity to dive into how do I optimize my bride? And inside of optimizing my bride, why shouldn't you all have the ability to the research and the education and the experience that we have inside of this practice so that you could receive the same information? So there you have it. There's another episode of the Dr. Greg Show. Stay tuned for more episodes coming up, and we'll talk to you soon.